Novel The Kite Runner by Khaled Hosseini, chapter number 23. Faces poke through the haze, linger, fade away. They peer down, ask me questions. They all ask questions. Do I know who I am? Do I hurt anywhere? I know who I am and I hurt everywhere. I want to tell them this, but talking hurts. I know this because some time ago, maybe a year ago, maybe two, maybe 10, I tried to talk to a child with a roach on his cheeks and eyes smeared black. The child, yes, I see him now. We are in the car of sorts. The child and I don't think Shreya is driving because Shreya never drives this fast. I want to say something to this child. It seems very important that I do, but I don't remember what I want to say or why it might have been important. Maybe I want to tell him to stop crying, that everything will be alright now. Maybe not, for some reason I can't think of. I want to thank the child. Faces, they are all wearing green hats. They slip in and out of view. They talk repeatedly, use words I don't understand. I hear other voices, other noises, beeps, and alarms, and always more faces peering down. I don't remember any of them except for the one with the gel in his hair and the Clark Gable mustache, the one with the Africa stain on his cap. Mr. Soap or opera star, that's funny. I want to laugh now, but laughing hurts too. I fade out. She says her name is Aisha, like the prophet's wife. Her graying hair is parted in the middle and tied in the ponytail. Her nose pierced with a stud shaped like the sun. She wears bifocals that make her eyes bug out. She wears greens too, and her hands are soft. She sees me looking at her and smiles, says something in English. Something is jabbing at the side of my chest. I fade out. A man is standing at my bedside. I know him. He is dark and lanky, has a long beard. He wears a hat. What are those hats called? Pacols. Wears it tilt to one side like a famous person whose name escapes me now. I know this man. He drove me somewhere a few years ago. I know him. There is something wrong with my mouth. I hear a bubbling sound. I fade out. My right arm's one the woman with the bifocals and sun-shaped stud is hunched over my arms, attaching a clear plastic tubbing it. She says it's the potassium. It stings like a bee. No, she says it does. What's her name? Something to do with a prophet. I know her too from a few years ago. She used to wear her hair in a ponytail. Now it's pulled back, tied in a bun. Soraya wore her hair like that. The first time we spoke, when was that? Last week? Aisha, yes. There is something wrong with my mouth and that thing jabbing at my chest. I fade out. We are in the Suleiman Mountains of Balochistan and Baba is wrestling the black bear. He's the Baba of my childhood. Tofan Aga, the towering specimen of Pashtun, might note the withered man under the blankets, the man with the sunken cheeks and a hollow eyes. They roll over a patch of green grass, man and beast. Baba's curly brown hair flying. The bear roars, or maybe it's Baba. Spittle and blood fly, claw and hand swipe. They fall to the ground with a loud thud, and a Baba is sitting on the bear's chest, his fingers digging in its snout. He looks up at me and I see he's mine. I am wrestling the bear. I wake up. The lanky dark man is back at my bedside. His name is Farid. I remember now. And with him is the child from the car. His face reminds me of the sound of buzz. I am thirsty. I fade out. I keep fading in and out. The name of the man with the Clark Gable mustache turned out the Dr. Faruqi. He was not a soap opera star at all, but a head and neck surgeon. Though I kept thinking of him as someone named Armand in some steamy soap set on a tropical island. Where am I? I wanted to ask, but my mouth wouldn't open. I frowned, grunted. Armand smiled. His teeth were blinding white. Not yet, Amir, he said, but soon. When the wires are out, he spoke English with a thick rolling Urdu accent. Wires? Armand crossed his arms. He had hairy forearms and wore a gold wedding band. You must be wondering where you are. What happened to you? That's perfectly normal. The post-surgical state is always disorienting. So I will tell you what I know. I wanted to ask him about the wires post-surgical. Where was Aisha? I wanted her to smile at me, vendor her soft hand in mine. Armand frowned, cooked one eyebrow in a slightly self-important way. You are in a hospital in Peshawar. You have been here 2 days. You have suffered some very significant injuries, Amir. I should tell you, I would say you are very lucky to be alive, my friend. He swayed his index finger back and forth like a pendulum when he said this. Your spleen had ruptured probably, and fortunately for you, a delayed rupture because you had sign of early hemorrhage into your abdominal cavity. My colleagues from the general surgery unit had to perform an emergency splenectomy. If it had ruptured earlier, you would have bled to death. He patted me on the arm, the one with the four, and smiled. You also suffered 7 broken ribs. One of them caused a pneumothorax. I frowned, tried to open my mouth, remembered about the wires. That means a punctured lung. Armand explained. He tugged at a clear plastic tubbing on my left side. I felt the jabbing again in my chest. We sealed the leak with this chest tube. I followed the tube poking through bandages on my chest to the container half filled with columns of water. The bubbling sound came from there. You had also suffered various lacerations, that means cuts. I wanted to tell him I knew what the word meant. I was a writer. I went to open my mouth, forgot about the wires again. The worst laceration was on your upper lip, Armand said. The impact had cut your upper lip in two, clean down the middle, but not to worry. The plastic guys sewed it back together and they think you will have an excellent result, though there will be a scar. This is unavoidable. There was also an orbital fracture on the left side. That's the eye socket bone, and we had to fix that too. The wires in your jaws will come out in about 6 weeks, Armand said. Until then, it's liquids and shakes. You will lose some weight and you will be talking like Al Pacino from the first Godfather movie from a little while. He laughed. But you have a job to do today. Do you know what it is? I shook my head. Your job today is to pass a gas. You do that and we can start feeding you liquids. No fart, no food. He laughed again. Later, after Aisha changed the Ford tubbing and raised the head of the bed like I had asked, I thought about what had happened to me. Ruptured spleen, broken teeth, punctured lung, busted eye socket. But as I watched a pigeon peck at a breadcrumb on the windowsill, I kept thinking of something else. Armand, Dr. Faruqi had said that the impact had cut your upper lip in two. He had said, clean down the middle like a hair lip. Farid and Sorab came to visit the next day. Do you know who we are today? Do you remember? Farid said, only half jokingly. I nodded. Alhamdulillah, he said, beaming. No more talking nonsense. Thank you, Farid, I said through jaws wired shut. Armand was right. I did sound like Al Pacino from The Godfather, and my tongue surprised me every time it poked in one of the empty spaces left by the teeth I had swallowed. I mean, thank you for everything. He waved a hand, blushed a little, but it's not worthy of thanks, he said. I turned to Saurabh. He was wearing new outfit, light brown pirhan tamban that looked a bit big for him, and a black skull cap. He was looking down at his feet, toying with the 4-line coiled on the bed. We were never properly introduced. I said. I offered him my hand. I am Amir. He looked at my hand, then to me. You are the Amir Agha father told me about, he said. Yes, I remembered the words from Hassan's letter. I have told much about you to Farzana Jan and Sorab, about us growing up together and playing games and running in the streets. They laugh at the stories of all the mischief you and I used to cause. I owe you thanks to Sorab Jan, I said. You saved my life. He didn't say anything. I dropped my hand when he didn't take it. I like your new clothes, I mumbled. They are my son's, Farid say. He has outgrown them. They fit Sorab pretty well, I say. Sorab could stay with him, he said, until we found a place for him. We don't have a lot of room, but what can I do? I can't leave him onto the street. Besides, my children have taken a liking to him. Huh, Sorab? But the boy just kept looking down, twiddling the line with his finger. I have been meaning to ask, Farid said a little hesitantly. What happened in that house? What happened between you and the Talib? Let's just say we both got what we deserve, I said. Farid nodded, didn't push it. It occurred to me that somewhere between the time we had left Peshawar for Afghanistan and now we had become friends. I have been meaning to ask something too. What? I didn't want to ask. I was afraid of the answer. Rahim Khan. I said he gone. My heart skipped. Is he? No, just gone. He handed me a folded piece of paper and a small key. The landlord gave me this when I went looking for him. He said Rahim Khan left the day after we did. Where did he go? Farid shrugged. The landlord didn't know. He said Rahim Khan left the letter and the key for you and took his leave. He checked his watch. I would better go. Bhaiya Saurabh, could you leave him here for a while? I said, pick him up later. I turned to Sarab. Do you want to stay here with me for a little while? He shrugged, said nothing. Of course, Farid said. I will pick him up just before evening namaz. There were three other patients in my room, two older men, one with a cast on his leg, the other wheezing with asthma, and a young man of 15 or 16 who had appendix surgery. The old guy in the cast stared at us without blinking, his eyes switching from me to the Hazara boy sitting on a stool. My roommate's family's old woman in bright shalwar kameez, children men wearing skull caps, shuffled noisily in and out of the room. They brought with them pakoras, naan, samosas, biryani. Sometimes people just wandered into the room like the tall bearded man who walked in just before Farid and Sorab arrived. He wore a brown blanket wrapped around him. Aisha asked him something in Urdu. He paid her no attention and scanned the room with his eyes. I thought he looked at me little longer than necessary. When the nurse spoke to him again, he just spun around and left. How are you? I asked Sorab. He shrugged, looked at his hand. Are you hungry? That lady there gave me a plate of biryani, but I can't eat it. I said I didn't know what else to say to him. You want it? He shook his head. Do you want to talk? He shook his head again. We sat there like that for a while, silent. Me propped up in bed, two pillows behind my back, Sorab on the three-legged stool next to the bed. I fell asleep at some point, and when I woke up, daylight had dimmed a bit. The shadows had stretched, and Sorab was still sitting next to me. He was still looking down at his hands. That night, after Farid picked up Sorab, I unfolded Rahim Khan's letter. I had delayed reading it as long as possible. It read, Amir Jan, inshallah you have reached this letter safely. I pray that I have not put you in harm's way and that Afghanistan has not been too unkind to you. You have been in my prayers since the day you left. You were right all those years to suspect that I knew. I did know. Hassan told me shortly after it happened. What you did was wrong, Amir Jan, but do not forget that you were a boy when it happened, a troubled little boy. You were too hard on yourself then, and you still are. I saw it in your eyes in Peshawar, but I hope you will heed this. A man who has no conscience, no goodness, does not suffer. I hope your suffering comes to an end with this journey to Afghanistan. Amir Jan, I am ashamed for the lies we told you all those years. You were right to be angry in Peshawar. You had a right to know. So did Hassan. I know it doesn't absolve anyone of anything, but the Kabul we lived in those days was a strange world, one in which some things mattered more than the truth. Amir Jan, I know how hard your father was on you when you were growing up. I saw how you suffered and yearned for his affections, and my heart bled for you. But your father was a man torn between two halves. Amir Jan, you and Hassan, he loved you both, but he could not love Hassan the way he longed to openly as a father, so he took it out on you instead. Amir, the socially legitimate half, the half that represented the riches he had inherited and the sin with impunity, privileges that came with them. When he saw you, he saw himself and his guilt. You are still angry, and I realize it is far too early to expect you to accept this, but maybe someday you will see that when your father was hard on you, he was also being hard on himself. Your father, like you, was a tortured soul, Amir Jan. I cannot describe to you the depth and the blackness of the sorrow that came over me when I learned of his passing. I loved him because he was my friend, but also because he was a good man, maybe even a great man. And this is what I want you to understand, that real good was born out of your father's remorse. Sometimes I think everything he did, feeding the poor on the streets, building the orphanage, giving money to friends in need, it was all his way of redeeming himself, and that, I believe, is what true redemption is, Amir Jan, when guilt leads to good. I know that in the end, God will forgive. He will forgive your father, me, and you too. I hope you can do the same. Forgive your father if you can. Forgive me if you wish. But most important, forgive yourself. I have left you some money. Most of what I have left. In fact, I think you have may have some expensive when you return here, and the money should be enough to cover them. There is a bank in Peshawar. Farid knows the location. The money is in a safe deposit box. I have given you the key. As for me, it is time to go. I have little time left and I wish to spend it alone. Please do not look for me. That is my final request of you. I leave you in the hands of God. Your friend always. Rahim. I dragged the hospital gown sleeve across my eye. I folded the letter and put it under my mattress. Amir, the socially legitimate half, the half that represented the riches he had inherited and the sin with impunity privileges that came with him them. Maybe that was why Baba and I had been on such better terms in the US. I wondered, spelling junk for pretty cash, or our menial jobs, our grimy apartment, the American version of a heart. Maybe in America, when Baba looked at me, he saw a little bit of Hassan. Your father, like you, was a tortured soul. Rahim Khan had written, maybe so we had both sinned and betrayed, but Baba had found a way to create a good out of his remorse. What I had done, other than take my guilt out on the very same people I had betrayed and then try to forget it all? What had I done other than become an insomniac? What had I ever done to the right things? When the nurse, not Aisha but a red-haired woman whose name escapes me, walked in with a syringe in hand and asked me if I needed a morphine injection, I said yes. They removed the chest tube early the next morning, and Armand gave the staff the go ahead to let me sip apple juice. I asked Aisha for a mirror when she placed the cup of juice on the dresser next to my bed. She lifted her bifocals to her forehead as she pulled the curtain open and let the morning sun flood the room. Remember now, she said over her shoulder. It will look better in a few days. My son-in-law was in mobbed accident last year. His handsome face was dragged on the asphalt and became purple like an eggplant. Now he is beautiful again, like a Hollywood movie star. Despite her reassurances, looking in the mirror and seeing the thing that insisted it was my face left me a little breathless. It looked like someone had stuck an air pump nozzle under my skin and had pumped away. My eyes were puffy and blue. The worst of it was my mouth. Grotesque blob of purple and red, all bruises and stitches. I tried to smile and a bolt of pain ripped through my lips. I would not be doing that for a while. There were stitches across my left cheek, just under the chin, on the forehead, just below the hairline. The old guy with the leg cast said something in Urdu. I gave him a shrug and shook my head. He pointed to his face, patted it and grinned a wide. Thank you, I whispered. Farid and Sorab came in just as I put the mirror away. Sorab took his seat on the stool, rested his head on the bedside rail. You know, the sooner we get you out of here, the better, Farid said. Dr. Faruqi says. I don't mean the hospital, I mean Peshawar. Why? I don't think you will be safe here for long, Farid said. He lowered his voice. The Taliban have friends here. They will start looking for you. I think they already may have, I murmured. I thought suddenly of the bearded man who had wandered into the room and just stood there staring at me. Farid leaned in. As soon as you can walk, I will take you to Islamabad. Not entirely safe there earlier. No place in Pakistan is, but it is better than here. At least it will buy you some time. Farid Jan, this can't be safe for you either. Maybe you should not be seen with me. You have a family to take care of. Farid made a waving gesture. My boys are young, but they are very cute. They know how to take care of their mothers and sisters. He smiled beside. I didn't say I would do it for free. I would not let you if you offered, I said. I forgot I could not smile and tried. A tiny streak of blood trickled down my chin. Can I ask you for one more favor? For you 1,000 times over, Farid said. And just like that, I was crying. I hissed gusts of air, tears gushing down my cheeks, stinging the raw flesh of my lips. What's the matter? Farid said, alarmed. I buried my face in one hand and held up the other. I knew the whole room was watching me after. I felt tired, hollow. I am sorry, I said. Sorab was looking at me with a frown creasing his brow. When I could talk again, I told Farid what I needed. Rahim Khan said they live there here in Peshawar. Maybe you should write down their names, Farid said, eyeing me cautiously as if I wondering what might set me off next. I scribbled their names on a scrap of paper towel. John and Betty called well. Farid pocketed the folded piece of paper. I will look for them as soon as I can, he said. He turned to Sorab. As for you, I will pick you up the evening. Don't tire Amir Agha too much. But Sorab had wandered to the window where a half dozen pigeons strutted back and forth on the sill, pecking at wood and scraps of old bread. In the middle drawer of the dresser beside my bed, I had found an old National Geographic magazine, a chewed up pencil, a comb with missing teeth, and what I was reaching for now, sweat pouring down my face from the effort, a deck of cards. I had counted them earlier and surprisingly found the deck complete. I asked Saurabh if he wanted to play. I didn't expect him to answer, let alone play. He had been quiet since we had fled Kabul, but he turned from the window and said, the only game I know is Panj Par. I feel sorry for you already because I am a grandmaster at Panj Par, world renowned. He took his seat on the stool next to me. I dealt him his 5 cards. When your father and I were your age, we used to play this game, especially in the winter when it snowed and we could not go outside. We used to play until the sun went down. He played me a card and picked one up from the pile. I stole looks at him as he pondered his cards. He was his father in so many ways. The way he fanned out his cards with both hands, the way he squinted while reading them, the way he rarely looked a person in the eye. We played in silence. I won the first game, let him win the next one, and lost the next 5 fair and square. You are as good as your father, maybe even better, I said after my last loss. I used to beat him sometimes, but I think he let me win. I paused before saying, your father and I were nursed by the same woman. I know. What did he tell you about us? That you were the best friend he ever had, he said. I twirled the jack of diamonds in my fingers, flipped it back and forth. I was not such a good friend, I am afraid, I said, but I would like to be your friend. I think I could be a good friend to you. Would that be alright? Would you like that? I put my hand on his arms gingerly, but he flinched. He dropped his cards and pushed away on the stool. He walked back to the window. The sky was awash with streaks of red and purple as the sun set on Peshawar. From the street below came a succession of honks and the braying of a donkey, the whistle of a policeman. Sorab stood in the crimson light, forehead pressed to the glass, fist buried in his armpits. Aisha had a male assistant help me take my first step that night. I only walked around the room once, one hand clutching the wheeled floor stand, the other clasping the assistant's forearm. It took me 10 minutes to make it back to bed, and then the incision on my stomach throbbed and I had broken out in a drenching sweat. I lay in bed, gasping, my heart hammering in my ears, thinking how much I missed my wife. Sorab and I played Panj Par most of the next day again in the silence, and the day after that we hardly spoke, just played Panj Par, me propped in bed, he on the 3-legged stool, our routine broken only by my taking a walk around the room, on going to the bathroom down the hall. I had a dream later that night. I dreamed Asif was standing in the doorway of my hospital room, brass balls still in his eye socket. We are the same, you and I, he was saying. You nursed with him, but you are my twin. I told Armand early that next day that I was leaving. It's still early for discharge, Armand protested. He was not dressed in surgical scrubs that day. Instead, in a button-down navy blue suit and yellow tie, the gel was back in the hair. You are still in intravenous antibiotics and I have to go, I said. I appreciate everything you have done for me, all of you. Really, but I have to leave. Where will you go? Armand said. I would rather not say. You can hardly walk. I can walk to the end of the hall and back, I said. I will be fine. The plan was this: leave the hospital, get the money from the safe deposit box and pay my medical bills, drive to the orphanage and drop Sorav off with John and Betty Calville, then get a ride to Islamabad and change the travel plans. Give myself a few more days to get better, fly home. That was the plan anyway, until the Farid and Sorav arrived that morning. Your friends with John and Betty Caldwell, they are not in Peshawar, Farid said. It had taken me 10 minutes just to slip into my Pirhan Tamban. My chest where they had cut me to insert the chest tube hurt when I raised my arm, and my stomach throbbed every time I leaned over. I was drawing ragged breaths just from the effort of packing a few of my belongings into the brown paper bag. But I had managed to get ready and was sitting on the edge of the bed when Farid came in with the news. Sorab sat on the bed next to me. Where did they go? I asked. Farid shook his head. You don't understand, because Rahim Khan said I went to the US. I went to the US consulate, Farid said, picking up my bag. There never was a John and Betty Caldwell in Peshawar. According to the people at the consulate, they never existed. No, not here in Peshawar anyhow. Next to me, Sorab was flipping through the pages of the old National Geographic. We got the money from the bank. The manager, paunchy man with sweet patches under his arms, kept flashing smiles and telling me that no one in the bank had touched the money. Absolutely nobody, he said gravely, swinging his index finger the same way Armand had. Driving through the Peshawar with so much money in a paper bag was a slightly frightening experience. Plus, I suspected every bearded man who stared at me to be a Talib killer sent by Asif. Two things compounded my fears. There are a lot of bearded men in Peshawar and everybody stares. What do we do with him? Farid said, walking me slowly from the hospital accounting office back to the car. Sora was in the back seat of the Land Cruiser, looking at traffic through the rolled-down window, chin resting on his palm. He can't stay in Peshawar, I said, panting. Nah, Amiraga, he can't, Farid said. He had read the question in my words. I am sorry, I wish I... That's all right, Farid, I said, manage a tired smile. You have mouth to feed. A dog was standing next to the truck now, propped on its rear legs, paws on the truck's door, tail wagging. Sora was petting the dog. I guess he goes to Islamabad for now, I said. I slept through almost the entire 4-hour ride to Islamabad. I dreamed a lot, and most of it I only remember as a hodgepodge of images, snippets of a visual memory flashing in my head like a cards in a Rolodex. Baba marinating lamb for my 13th birthday party, Suraya and I making love for the first time, the sun rising in the east, our ears still ringing from the wedding music, her henna-painted hands laced in mine, the time Baba had taken Hassan and me to a strawberry field in Jalalabad. The owner had told us we could eat as much as we wanted to as long as we both at least 4 kilos, and how we had both ended up with belly aches. How dark, almost black, Hassan's blood had looked on the snow dropping from the seat of his pants. Blood is a powerful thing, Bacham. Khala Jamila patting Suraya's knee and saying, God knows best, maybe it wasn't meant to be. Sleeping on the roof of my father's house, Baba saying that the only sin that mattered was theft. When you tell a lie, you steal a man's right to the truth. Rahim Khan on the phone telling me there was a way to be good again, a way to be good again. Chapter number 24. If Peshawar was the city that reminded me of what Kabul used to be, then Islamabad was the city Kabul could have become someday. The streets were wider than Peshawar's, cleaner and lined with the rows of hibiscus and flame trees. The bazaar were more organized and not nearly as clogged with rickshaws and pedestrians. The architecture was more elegant too, more modern, and I saw parks where roses and jasmine bloomed in the shadows of trees. Farid found a small hotel on a side street running along the foot of the Margalla Hills. We passed the famous Shah Faisal Mosque on the way there, reputedly the biggest mosque in the world with its giant concrete girders and soaring minarets. Sorab parked up at the sight of mosque, leaned out of the window and looked at it until Farid turned a corner. The hotel room was a vast improvement over the one in Kabul where Farid and I had stayed. The sheets were clean, the carpet vacuumed, and the bathroom spotless. There was shampoo, soap, razors for shaving, a bathtub, and towels that smelled like lemon, and no blood stains on the wall. One other thing, a television set sat on the dresser across from the 2 single beds. Look, I said to Sorab. I turned it on manually, no remote, and turned the dial. I found a children's show with 2 fluffy sheep puppets singing in Urdu. Sorab sat on one of the beds and drew his knees to his chest. Images from the TV reflected in his green eyes as he watched stone face rocking back and forth. I remembered the time I had promised Hassan I would buy his family a color TV when we both grew up. I will get going. I will get going, Amir Agha, Fareed said. Stay the night, I said. It's a long drive, leave tomorrow. Tashakkur, he said, but I want to get back tonight. I miss my children. On his way out of the room, he paused in the doorway. Goodbye, Sorab Jan, he said. He waited for a reply, but Sorab paid him no attention, just rocked back and forth. His face lit by the silver glow of the images flickering across the screen. Outside, I gave him an envelope. When he tore it, his mouth opened. I didn't know how to thank you, I said. You have done so much for me. How much is in here? Freeze said, slightly dazed. A little over $2,000. 2,000? He began. His lower lip was quivering a little. Later, when he pulled away from the curb, he honked twice and waved. I waved back. I never saw him again. I returned to the hotel room and found Sarab laying on the bed, curled up in a big sea. His eyes were closed, but I could not tell if he was sleeping. He had shut off the television. I sat on my bed and grimaced with pain, wiped the cool sweat off my brow. I wondered how much longer it would hurt to get up, sit down, roll over in bed. I wondered when I would be able to eat solid food. I wondered what I could do with the wounded little boy laying on the bed, though a part of me already knew. There was a carafe of water on the dresser. I poured a glass and took two of Armand's painkiller. The water was warm and bitter. I pulled the curtains, eased myself back on the bed and lay down. I thought my chest would rip open when the pain dropped a notch and I could breathe again. I pulled the blanket to my chest and waited for the almond pills to work. When I woke up, the room was darker. The slice of sky peeking between the curtains was the purple of twilight turning into the night. The sheets were soaked and my head pounded. I had been dreaming again, but I could not remember what it had been about. My heart gave a sick lurch when I looked to Sarab's bed and found it empty. I called his name. The sound of my voice startled me. It was disorientating, sitting in a dark hotel room thousands of miles from home, my body broken, calling the name of a boy I had only met a few days ago. I called his name again and heard nothing. I struggled out of the bed, checked the bathroom, looked in the narrow hallway outside the room. He was gone. I locked the door and hobbled to the manager's office in the lobby, one hand clutching the rail along the walkway for support. There was a fake dusty palm tree in the corner of the lobby and flying pink flamingos on the wallpaper. I found the hotel manager reading a newspaper behind the formica-topped check-in counter. I described Sarab to him, asked if he had seen him. He put down his paper and took off his reading glasses. He had greasy hair and a square-shaped little mustache speckled with grey. He smelled vaguely of some tropical fruit I could not quite recognize. Boys, they like to run around, he said, sighing. I have three of them. All day they are running around troubling their mother. He fanned his face with the newspaper, staring at my jaws. I don't think he is out running around, I said, and we are not from here. I am afraid he might get lost. He bobbled his head from the side to side. Then you should have kept an eye on the boy, mister. I know, I said, but I fell asleep and when I woke up he was gone. Boys must be tended to, you know. Yes, I said, my pulse quickening. He could be so oblivious to my apprehensions. He shifted the newspaper to his other hand, resumed the fanning. They want bicycles now. Who? My boys, he said. They are saying, Daddy, Daddy, please buy a bicycle and we all no trouble you. Please, Daddy. He gave a short laugh through his nose. Bicycles, their mother will kill me, I swear to you. I imagined Sorab laying in a ditch or in the trunk of some car, bound and gagged. I didn't want his blood on my hands, not his too. Please, I said. I squinted, read his name tag on the lapel of his short-sleeved blue cotton shirt. Mr. Fiaz, have you seen him, the boy? I bit down. Yes, the boy who came with me. Have you seen him or not? For God's sake. The fanning stopped, his eyes narrowed. Not getting smarter with me, my friend. I am not the one who lost him. That he had a point did not stop the blood from rushing to my face. You are right. I am wrong, my fault. Now have you seen him? Sorry, he said curtly. He put his glasses back on, snapped his newspaper open. I have seen no such boy. I stood at the counter for a minute trying not to scream as I was exiting the lobby, he said. Any idea where he might have wandered to? No, I said. I felt tired and scared. Does he have an interest? He said. I saw he had folded the paper. My boys, for example, they will do anything for American action films, especially with that ardent What's that? Eager. The mosque. I said the big mosque. I remembered the way the mosque had jolted Sora from his stupor when he had driven by it. How he had leaned out of the window looking at it. Shah Faisal, yes, can you take me there? Did you know it's the biggest mosque in the world? He asked. No, but the courtyard alone can fit 40,000 people. Can you take me there? It's only a kilometer from here, he said, but he was already pushing away from the counter. I will pay you for the ride, I said. He sighed and shook his head. Wait here. He disappeared into black room, returned wearing another pair of eyeglasses, a set of keys in hand, and with a short, chubby woman in an orange sari trailing him. She took his seat behind the counter. I don't take your money, he said, blowing by me. I will drive you because I am a father like you. I thought we had end up driving around the city until night fell. I saw myself calling the police, describing Sarab to them under Fayaz reproachful glare. I heard the officer, his voice tired and uninterested, asking the obligatory questions, and beneath the official question, an unofficial one. Who the hell cared about another dead Afghan kid? But we found him about 100 yards from the mosque, sitting in the half-full parking lot on an island of grass. Fiaz pulled up to the island and let me out. I have to get back, he said. That's fine, we will walk back, I said. Thank you, Mr. Fiaz, really. He leaned across the front seat when I got out. Can I say something to you? Sure. In the dark of twilight, his face was just a pair of eyeglasses reflecting the fading light. The thing that about you, Afghanis, is that, well, you people are little reckless. I was tired and in pain. My jaws throbbed, and those damn wounds on my chest and stomach felt like barbed wire under my skin. But I started to laugh anyway. What did I? Fiaz was saying, but I was cackling by then, full-throated burst of laughter spilling through my wide mouth. Crazy people, he said. His tires screeched when he peeled away, his tail lights blinking red in the dimming light. You gave me a good scare, I said. I sat beside him, wincing with pain as I bent. He was looking at the mosque. Shah Faisal Mosque was shaped like a giant tent. Cars came and went. Worshippers dressed in white streamed in and out. We sat in silence, we leaning against the tree, Sarab next to me, knees to his chest. We listened to the call to prayer, watched the building. Hundreds of light come on, daylight faded. The mosque sparkled like a diamond in the dark. It lit up the sky. Sarab's face. Have you ever been to Mazar Sharif? Sarab said, his chin resting on his kneecaps. A long time ago. I don't remember it much. Father took me there when I was little. Mother and Sasa came along too. Father bought me a monkey from the bazaar. Not a real one, but the kind you have to blow up. It was brown and had a bow tie. I might have had one of those when I was a kid. Father took me to the blue mosque, Saraf said. I remember there were so many pigeons outside the masjid and they were not afraid of people. They came right up to us. Sasa gave me little pieces of naan and I fed the birds. Soon there were pigeons going all around me. That was fun. You must miss your parents very much, I said. I wondered if he had seen the Taliban drag his parents out into the street. I hoped he had not. Do you miss your parents? He asked, resting his cheek on his knees, looking up at me. Do I miss my parents? Well, I never met my mother. My father died a few years ago, and yes, I do miss him, sometimes a lot. Do you remember what he looked like? I thought of Baba's thick neck, his black eyes, his unruly brown hairs. Sitting on his lap had me like sitting on a pair of tree trunks. I remember what he looked like. I said what he smelled like too. I am starting to forget their faces, Soraf said. Is that bad? No. I said time does that. I thought of something. I looked in the front of pocket of my coat, found the Polaroid snapshot of Hassan and Soraf. Here, I said. He brought the photo to within an inch of his face, and it so the light from the mosque fell on it. He looked at it for a long time. I thought he might cry, but he didn't. He just held it in both hands, traced his thumb over its surface. I thought of a line I had read somewhere, or maybe I had heard someone say it. There are a lot of children in Afghanistan, but little childhood. He stretched his hand to give it back to me. Keep it, I said. It's yours. Thank you. He looked at the photo again and stored it in the pocket of his vest. A horse-drawn cart clip glowed by in the parking lot. Little bells dangled from the horse's neck and jingled with each step. I have been thinking a lot about mosques lately, Sorab said. You have? What about them? He shrugged. Just thinking about them, he lifted his face, looked straight at me. Now he was crying softly, silently. Can I ask you something, Amir Agha? Of course. Will God, he began and choked a little. Will God put me in hell for what I did to that man? I reached for him and he flinched. I pulled back. Nah, of course not, I said. I wanted to pull him close, hold him, tell him the world had been unkind to him, not the other way around. His face twisted and strained to stay composed. Father used to say it's wrong to hurt even bad people because they don't know any better and because bad people sometimes become good. No, not always, Sorab. He looked at me questioningly. The man who hurt you, I knew him from many years ago, I said. I guess you figured that out that from the conversation he and I had. He tried to hurt me once when I was your age, but your father saved me. Your father was very brave and he was always rescuing me from trouble, standing up for me. So one day the bad man hurt your father. Instead, he hurt him in a very bad way, and I couldn't save your father the way he had saved me. Why did people want to hurt my father? Suraf said in a wheezy little voice. He was never mean to anyone. You are right. Your father was a good man, but that's what I am trying to tell you, Sarab Jan. That there are bad people in the world, and sometimes bad people stay bad. Sometimes you have to stand up to them. What you did to that man is what I should have done to him all those years ago. You gave him what he deserved, and he deserved even more. Do you think father is disappointed in me? I know he's not. I said you saved my life in Kabul. I know he is very proud of you for that. He wiped his face with the sleeve of his shirt. It burst bubble of spittle that had formed on his lips. He buried his face in his hands and wept a long time before he spoke again. I miss father. And mother too, he croaked, and I miss Sasa and Rahim Khan Sahib, but sometimes I am glad they are not here anymore. Why? I touched his arm, he drew back. Because, he said, gasping and hitching between sobs. Because I don't want them to see me. I am so dirty. He sucked in his breath and let it out in a long, wheezy cry. I am so dirty and full of sin. You are not dirty, Sorab, I said. Those men, you are not dirty at all. They did things. The bad man and the other two, they did things to me. You are not dirty and you are not full of sin. I touched his arm again and he drew away. I reached again gently and pulled him to me. I won't hurt you, I whispered. I promise. He resisted a little, slackened. He let me draw him to me and rested his head on my chest. His little body convulsed in my arms with each sob. A kinship exists between people who have fed from the same breast. Now, as the boy's pain soaked through my shirt, I saw that a kinship had taken root between us two. What had happened in that room with Asif had irrevocable bound us. I had been looking for the right time, the right moment to ask the question that had been buzzing around in my head and keeping me up at night. I decided the moment was now, right there, right now, with the bright lights of the house of God shining on us. Would you like to come live in America with me and my wife? He didn't answer. He sobbed into my shirt and I let him. For a week, neither one of us mentioned what I had asked him, as if the question had not been posed at all. Then one day, Sorab and I took a taxi cab to a Damne viewpoint, or the hem of the mountains, perched midway the Margala Hills. It gives a panoramic view of Islamabad, its rows of clean tree-lined avenues and white houses. The driver told us we could see the presidential palace from up there if it has rained and the air is clear. You can even see past Rawalpindi, he said. I saw his eyes in the rearview mirror, skipping from Sorab to me, back and forth, back and forth. I saw my own face too. It was not as swollen as before, but it had taken on a yellow tint from my assortment of fading bruises. We sat on the bench in one of the picnic areas in the shade of gum tree. It was a warm day. The sun perched high in a topaz blue sky. On benches nearby, families snacked on a samosas and pakoras. Somewhere a radio played a Hindi song I thought I remember from an old movie, maybe Pakiza. Kids, many of them Sorab's age, chased soccer balls, giggling, yelling. I thought about the orphanage in Kartesai, thought about the rat that had scurried between my feet in Zaman's office. My chest tightened with a surge of unexpected anger at the way my countrymen were destroying their own land. What? Surab asked. I forced a smile and told him it wasn't important. We unrolled one of the hotel's bathroom towels on the picnic table and played panchpar on it. It felt good being there with my half brother's son playing cards, the warmth of the sun patting the back of my neck. The song ended and another one started, one I didn't recognize. Look, Sarab said. He was pointing to the sky with his cards. Up saw a hawk circling in the broad seamless sky. Didn't know there were hawks in Islamabad, I said. Me neither, he said, his eyes tracing the bird's circular flight. Do they have them where you live? San Francisco? I guess so. I can't say I have seen too many though. Oh, he said. I was hoping he would ask more, but he dealt another hand and asked if we could eat. I opened the paper bag and gave him his meatball sandwich. My lunch consisted of yet another cup of blended bananas and oranges. I had rented Mrs. Fia's blender for the week. I sucked through the straw and my mouth filled with the sweet blended fruit. Some of it dripped from the corner of my lips. Sorab handed me a napkin and watched me dab at my lips. I smiled and he smiled back. Your father and I were brothers, I said. It just came out. I had wanted to tell him the night we had sat by the mosque, but I hadn't. But he had a right to know. I didn't want to hide anything anymore. Half brothers, really? We had the same father. Surab stopped chewing, put the sandwich down. Father never said he had a brother. That's because he didn't know. Why didn't he know? No one told him, I said. No one told me either. I just found out recently. Surab blinked like he was looking at me, really looking at me for the very first time. But why did people hide it from father and you? You know, I asked myself that same question the other day and there's an answer, but no, not a good one. Let's just say they didn't tell us because your father and I were not supposed to be brothers, because he was Hazara. I willed my eyes to stay on him. Yes. Did your father, he began eyeing his food, did your father love you and my father equally? I thought of long ago day at Ghargha Lake when Baba had allowed himself to pat Hassan on the back when Hassan's stone had outskipped mine. I pictured Baba in the hospital room beaming as they removed the bandages from the Hassan's lips. I think he loved us equally but differently. Was he ashamed of my father? No. I said, I think he was ashamed of himself. He picked up his sandwich and nibbled at it silently. We left late that afternoon, tired from the heat, but tired in a pleasant way. All the way back, I felt Sarah watching me. I had the driver pull over at a store that sold calling cards. I gave him the money and a tip for running in and buying me one. That night, we were laying on our beds, watching a talk show on a TV. Two clerics with paper grey long beards and the white turbans were taking calls from the faithful all over the world. One caller from Finland, a guy named Ayub, asked if his teenage son could go to hell for wearing his baggy pants so low the seam of his underwear showed. I saw a picture of San Francisco once, or Rob said. Really? There was a red bridge and a building with a pointy top. You should see the street, I said. What about them? He was looking at me now. On the TV screen, the two mullahs were consulting each other. They are so steep. When you drive up, all you see in the hood of your car and the sky, I said. It sounds scary, he said. He rolled to his side, facing me, his back to the TV. It is the first few times, I said, but you get used to it. Does it snow there? No, but we get a lot of fog. You know that red bridge you saw? Yes. Sometimes the fog is so thick in the morning, all you see is the tip of the two towers poking through. There was wonder in his smile. Oh, Sorab? Yes? Have you given any thought to what I asked you before? His smile faded. He rolled to his bag, placed his hand under his head. The mullahs decided that Ayub's son would go to hell after all for wearing his pants the way he did. They claimed it was in the hadith. I have thought about it, Sorab said, and it scares me. I know it's a little scary, I said, grabbing onto that loose thread of hope, but you will learn English so fast and you will get used to it. That's not what I mean. That scares me too, but, but what? He rolled toward me again, drew his knee up. What if you get tired of me? What if your wife doesn't like me? I struggled out of bed and crossed the space between us. I sat beside him. I won't ever get tired of you, Sarab, I said. Not ever. That's a promise. You are my nephew, remember? And Suraya Jan, she's very kind woman. Trust me, she's going to love you. I promise that too. I chanced something, reached down and took his hand. He tightened up a little but let me hold it. I don't want to go to another orphanage, he said. I won't ever let that happen. I promise you that. I cupped his hand in both of mine. Come home with me. His tears were soaking the pillow. He didn't say anything for a long time. Then his hand squeezed mine back and he nodded. He nodded. The connection went through on the fourth try. The phone rang 3 times before she picked it up. Hello, it was 7:30 in the evening in Islamabad. Roughly about the same time in the morning in California. That meant Suraya had been up for an hour getting ready for school. It's me, I said. I was sitting on my bed watching Sorab sleep. Amir, she almost screamed. Are you okay? Where are you? I am in Pakistan. What? Why didn't you call earlier? I have been sick with tashwish. My mother's praying and doing nazar every day. I am sorry I didn't call. I am fine now. I had told her I would be away a week. 2 at the most. I had been gone for nearly a month. I smiled. And tell Khala Jamila to stop killing sheep. What do you mean fine now? And what's wrong with your voice? Don't worry about the phone now. I am fine, really, Suraya. I have a story to tell you. Story? I should have told you a long time ago, but first I need to tell you one thing. What is it? She said, her voice lower now, more cautious. I am not coming alone. I am bringing a little boy with me. I paused. I want us to adopt him. What? I checked my watch. I have 57 minutes left on the stupid Khaled card and I have so much to tell you. Sit somewhere. I heard the legs of a chair dragged hurriedly across the wooden floor. Go ahead, she said. Then I did what I hadn't done in 15 years of marriage. I told my wife everything. I had pictured this moment so many times. Dreaded it. But as I spoke, I felt something lifting off my chest. I imagined Suraya had experienced something very similar the night of our custody when she had told me about her past. By the time I was done with my story, she was weeping. What do you think? I said. I don't know what to think, Amir. You have told me so much all at once. I realized that. I heard her blowing her nose, but I know this much. You have to bring him home. I want you to. Are you sure? I said, closing my eyes and smiling. Am I sure? She said. Amir, he's your calm, your family, so he's my calm too. Of course I am sure. You can't leave him to the streets. There was a short pause. What he likes? I looked over at Sorab sleeping on the bed, his feet in a solemn kind of way. Who can blame him? She said. I want to see him, Amir. I really do. Suraya, yeah. Toasted the room. I love you. I love you back, she said. I could hear the smile in her words. And be careful. I will, and one more thing, don't tell your parents who he is. If they need to know, it should come from me. Okay, we hung up. The lawn outside the American embassy in Islamabad was neatly mowed, dotted with circular clusters of flowers bordered by razor-straight hedges. The building itself was like a lot of buildings in Islamabad, flat and wide. We passed through several roadblocks to get there, and 3 different security officials conducted a body search on me after the wires in my jaw set off the metal detectors. When we finally stepped in from the heat, the air conditioning hit my face like a splash of ice water. The secretary in the lobby, a 50-something lean-faced blonde woman smiled when I gave her my name. She wore a beige blouse and black slacks, the first woman I had seen in weeks dressed in a something other than a burqa or a shalwar kameez. She looked me up on the appointment list, tapping the eraser end of her pencil on the desk. She found my name and asked me to take a seat. Would you like some lemonade? She asked. None for me, thanks, I said. How about your son? Excuse me? The handsome young gentleman, she said, smiling at Sorab. Oh, That would be nice, thank you. Surab and I sat on the black leather sofa across the reception desk next to tall American flag. Surab picked up two magazines from the glass top coffee table. He flipped the pages, not really looking at the pictures. What? Surab said. Sorry, you are smiling. I was thinking about you, I said. He gave a nervous smile, picked up another magazine and flipped through it under 30 seconds. Don't be afraid, I said, touching his arm. These people are friendly, relaxed. I could have used my own advice. I kept shifting in my seat, untying and retying my shoelaces. The secretary placed a tall glass of lemonade with ice on the coffee table. There you go. Surab smiled shyly. Thank you very much, he said in English. It came out as, thank you very much. Thank you very much. It was the only English he knew. He had told me that and have a nice day. She laughed. You are most welcome. She walked back to her desk, high heels clicking on the floor. Have a nice day, Surab said. Raymond Andrews was a short fellow with a small hand, nails, perfectly trimmed wedding band on the ring finger. He gave me a curt little shake. It felt like squeezing a sparrow. Those are the hands that hold our fates, I thought as Sorab and I seated ourselves across from his desk. A Les Miserables poster was nailed to the wall behind Andrews next to the topographical map of the USA port of tomato plants basked in the sun on the windowsill. Smoke? He asked, his voice a deep baritone that was at odds with his slight stature. No thanks, I said, not caring at all for the way Andrew's eyes barely gave Sorab a glance, or the way he didn't look at me when he spoke. He pulled open a desk drawer and lit a cigarette from a half-empty pack. He also produced a bottle of lotion from the same drawer. He looked at his tomato plants as he rubbed lotion into his hand, cigarette dangling from the corner of his mouth. Then he closed the drawer, put his elbows on the desktop and exhaled. So he said, crinkingly, his grey eyes against the smoke, tell me your story. I felt like Jean Valjean sitting across from Javert. I reminded myself that I was on American soil now, that this guy was on my side, that he got paid for helping people like me. I want to adopt this boy. Take him back to the States with me, I said. Tell me your story, he repeated, crushing a flake of ash on the neatly arranged desk with his index finger, flicking it into the trash can. I gave him the version I had worked out in my head since I had hung up with Suraya. I had gone into Afghanistan to bring back my half-brother's son. I had found the boy in squalid condition, wasting away in an orphanage. I had paid the orphanage director a sum of money and withdraw the boy. Then I had brought him to Pakistan. You are the boy's half uncle? Yes. He checked his watch, leaned and turned the tomato plant into the sill. No. Anyone who can attest to that? Yes, but I don't know where he is now. He turned to me and nodded. I tried to read his face and I couldn't. I wondered if he had ever tried those little hands of his at poker. I assume getting your jaws wired isn't the latest fashion statement, he said. We were in trouble, Sorab and I knew it then. I told him I had gotten mugged in Peshawar. Of course, he said, cleared his throat. Are you Muslim? Yes. Practicing? Yes, in truth, I didn't remember the last time I had laid my forehead to the ground in prayer. Then I did remember the day Dr. Amani gave Baba his prognosis, had kneeled on the prayer rug, remembering only fragments of verses I had learned in school. Helps your case some but not much, he said, scratching a spot on the flawless part in the sandy hair. What do you mean? I asked. I reached for Sarab's hand, intertwined my fingers with his. Sorab looked uncertainly from me to Andrews. There's a long answer and I am sure I will end up giving it to you. You want the short one first? I guess I said. Andrew crushed his cigarette, his lips pursed. Give it up. I am sorry. Your petition to adopt this young fellow, give it up. That's my advice to you. Duly noted, I said. Now perhaps you will tell me why. That means you want the long answer, he said, his voice impassive, not reacting at all to my curt tone. He pressed his hands palm to palm as if he were kneeling before the Virgin Mary. Let's assume the story you gave me, it's true. Though it would bet my pension a good deal if of it's either fabricated or omitted. Note that I care, mind you. You are here, he's here. That's all that matters. Even so, your petition faces significant obstacles, not the least of which is that this child is not an orphan. Of course he is. Not legally he isn't. His parents was executed in the street. The neighbor saw it. I said, glad we were speaking in English. You have death certificates? Death certificates? This is Afghanistan we are talking about. Most people there don't have birth certificates. His glassy eyes didn't so much as blink. I don't make the law, sir. Your outrage notwithstanding, you still need to prove the parents are deceased. The boy has to be declared a legal orphan. But you wanted the long answer and I am giving it to you. Your next problem is that you need the cooperation of the child's country of origin. Now that's difficult under the best of circumstances, and to quote you, this is Afghanistan we are talking about. We don't have an American embassy in Kabul. That makes things extremely complicated, just about impossible. What are you saying? That I should throw him back on the streets? I said, I didn't say that. He was sexually abused, I said, thinking of the bells around Sorab's ankles, the mascara on his eyes. I am sorry to hear that. Andrew's mouth said. The way he was looking at me thought we might as well have been talking about the weather, but that is not going to make the INS issue this young fellow a visa. What are you saying? I am saying that if you want to help, send money to a reputable relief organization, volunteer at a refugee camp, but at this point in time we strongly discourage US citizens from attempting to adopt Afghan children. I got up. Come on, Sorab, I said in Farsi. Sorab slid next to me, rested his head on my hip. I remembered the Polaroid of him and Hassan standing that same way. Can I ask you something, Mr. Andrews? Yes. Do you have children? For the first time he blinked. Well, do you? It's a simple question. He was silent. I thought so. I said, taking Sorab's hand, they ought to put someone in your chair who knows what it's like to want a child. I turned to go, Sorab trailing me. Can I ask you a question? Andrew called. Go ahead. Have you promised this child you will take him with you? What if I have? He shook his head. It's a dangerous business making promises to kids. He sighed and opened his desk drawer again. You mean to pursue this? He said, rummaging through the papers. I mean to pursue this. He produced a business card. Then I advise you to get a good immigration lawyer. Umar Faisal works here in Islamabad. You can tell him I sent you. I took the card from him. Thanks, I muttered. Good luck, he said. As we exited the room, I glanced over my shoulder. Andrews was standing in a rectangle of sunlight, absently staring out a window, his hands turning the potted tomato plants toward the sun, petting them lovingly. Take care, the secretary said as we passed her desk. Your boss could use some manners, I said. I expected her to roll her eyes, maybe not in that. I know everybody says that kind of way. Instead, she lowered her voice. Poor Ray. He hasn't been the same since his daughter died. I raised an eyebrow. Suicide? She whispered. I know it sounds crazy, but I find myself wondering what his favorite korma will be or his favorite subject in school. I picture myself helping him with homework. She laughed. In the bathroom, the water had stopped running. I could hear Sorab in there shifting in the tub, spilling water over the sides. You are going to be great, I said. Oh, I almost forgot. I called Kaka Sharif. I remembered him reciting a poem at our nikah from a scrap of hotel stationery paper. His son had held the Quran over our heads as a suraya, and I had walked toward the stage, smiling at the flashing cameras. What did he say? Well, he is going to steer the boat for us. He will call some of his INS buddies, she said. That's really great news, I said. I can't wait for you to see Sorab. I can't wait to see you, she said. I hung up smiling. On the taxi ride back to the hotel, Sarab rested his head on the window, kept staring at the passing buildings, the rows of gum trees. His breath fogged the glass, clear fogged it again. I waited for him to ask me about the meeting, but he didn't. On the other side of the closed bathroom door, the water was running. Since the days we had checked into the hotel, Sarab took a long bath every night before bed. In Kabul, hot running water had been like fathers a rare commodity. Now Sarab spent almost an hour a night in the bath, soaking in the soapy water, scrubbing, sitting on the edge of the bed. I called Surya. I glanced at the thin line of light under the bathroom door. Do you feel clean yet, Sarab? I passed on the Surya what Raymond Andrew had told me. So what do you think? I said. We have to think he's wrong. She told me she had called a few adoption agencies that arrange international adoptions. She hadn't yet found one that would consider doing an Afghan adoption, but she was still looking. How are your parents taking the news? Mother is happy for us. You know how she feels about you. I mean, you can do not wrong in her eyes, but there, well, as always, he's little harder to read. He's not saying much. And you, are you happy? I heard her shifting the receiver to her other hand. I think we will be good for your nephew, but maybe that little boy will be good for us too. I was thinking the same thing. Sorab emerged from the bathroom a few minutes later. He had barely said a dozen words since the meeting with Raymond Andrews, and my attempts at conversation had only met with a nod or a monosyllabic reply. He climbed into bed, pulled the blanket to his chin. Within minutes he was snoring. I wiped a circle on the fogged up mirror and shaved with one of the hotel's old-fashioned razors, the type that opened and you slid the blade in. Then I took my own bath, lay there until the steaming hot water turned cold and my skin shriveled up. I lay there drifting, wondering, imagining. Omar Faisal was chubby, dark-haired, dimpled cheek, black button eyes, and an affable gap tooth. His thinning grey hair was tied back in ponytail. He wore a brown corduroy suit with leather elbow patches and carried a worn, overstuffed briefcase. The handle was missing, so he clutched the briefcase to his chest. He was the sort of fellow who started a lot of sentences with a laugh and unnecessary apology. Like, I am sorry, I will be there at 5 laugh. When I had called him, he had insisted on coming out to meet us. I am sorry, the cabbies in this town are shark, he said in the perfect English without a trace of an accent. They smell of foreign, they triple their fares. He pushed through the door, all smiles and apologies, wheezing a little and sweating. He wiped his brow with a handkerchief and opened his briefcase, rummaged in it for a notepad, and apologized for the sheets of paper that spilled on the bed. Sitting cross-legged on his bed, Sorab kept one eye on the muted television, the other on the harried lawyer. I had told him in the morning that Faisal would be coming, and he had nodded, almost asked something, and had just gone on watching a show with talking animals. Here we are, Faisal said, flipping open a yellow legal notepad. I hope my children take after their mother when it comes to organization. I am sorry, probably not the sort of thing you want to hear from your prospective lawyer. He laughed. Well, Raymond Andrews think highly of you. He did? Oh yes, so you are familiar with my situation. Faisal dabbed at the sweet beads above his lips. I am familiar with the version of the situation you gave Mr. Andrews, he said, his cheeks dimpled with a coy smile. He turned to Sorab. This must be the young man who's causing all the trouble, he said in Farsi. This is Sorab, I said. Sorab, this is Mr. Faisal, the lawyer I told you about. Sorab slid down the side of his bed and shook hands with Umar Faisal. Assalamu alaikum, he said in a low voice. Assalamu alaikum, Sorab, Faisal said. Did you know you are named after a great warrior? Sorab nodded, climbed back onto his bed and lay on his side to watch TV. I didn't know you spoke Farsi so well, I said in English. Did you grow up in Kabul? No, I was born in Karachi, but I did live in Kabul for a number of years. Share now near the Haji Yaqub Mosque, Faisal said. I grew up in Berkeley. Actually, my father opened a music store there in the late 60s. Free love, headbands, tie-dyed shirts, you name it. He leaned forward. It was at Woodstock. Groovy, I said, and Faisal laughed so hard he started sweating all over again. Anyway, I continued, what I told Mr. Andrew was pretty much it's safe for a thing or a two, or maybe three. I will give you the uncensored version. He licked a finger and flipped to a blank page, uncapped his pen. I would appreciate that, Amir, and why don't we just keep it in English from here on out? Fine. I told everything that happened, told him about my meeting with Rahim Khan, the trek to Kabul, the orphanage, the stoning at Ghazi Stadium. God, he whispered, I am sorry, I have such fond memories of Kabul. Hard to believe. It's the same place you are telling me about. Have you been there lately? God, no, it's not Berkeley. I will tell you that. I said, go on. I told him the rest, the meeting with Asif, the fight, Sorab and his slingshot, or escape back to Pakistan. When I was done, he scribbled a few notes, breathed in deeply and gave me a sober look. Well, Amir, you have got a tough battle ahead of you. Or one I can win. He capped his pen at the risk of sounding like Raymond Andrews. It's not likely, not impossible, but hardly likely. Gone was the affable smile, the playful look in his eyes. But it's kid like Sorab who need a home the most, I said. These rules and regulations don't make any sense to me. You are preaching to the choir, Amir, he said. But the fact is, take current immigration laws, adoption agency policies, and the political situation in the Afghanistan, and that deck is stacked against you. I don't get it, I said. I wanted to hit something. I mean, I get it, but I don't get it. Umar nodded, his brow furrowed. Well, it's like this. In the aftermath of a disaster, whether it's be natural or man-made, and the Taliban are a disaster. Amir, believe me, it's always difficult to ascertain that a child is an orphan. Kids get displaced in refugee camps, or parents just abandon them because they can't take care of them. Happens all the time. So the INS won't grant a visa unless it's clear the child meets the definition of an eligible orphan. I am sorry, I know it sounds ridiculous, but you need death certificates. You have been to Afghanistan, I said. You know how improbable that is. I know, he said, but let's suppose it's clear that the child has no surviving parent. Even then, the INS thinks it's good adoption practice to place the child with someone in his own country so his heritage can be preserved. What heritage? I said. The Taliban have destroyed that heritage Afghan had. You saw what they did to the giant Buddhas in Bamiyan. I am sorry, I'm telling you how the INS works, Amir, Umar said. Touching my arm, he glanced at Surab and smiled, turned back to me. Now a child has to be legally adopted according to the laws and regulation of his own country. But when you have a country in turmoil, say a country like Afghanistan, government offices are busy with emergencies and processing adoptions want to be a top priority. I sighed and rubbed my eyes. A pounding headache was settling in just behind them. But let's suppose that somehow Afghanistan gets its act together, Umar said, crossing his arms on his protruding belly. It still may not permit this adoption. In fact, even the more moderate Muslim nations are hesitant with adoptions because in many of those countries Islamic law Sharia doesn't recognize adoption. You are telling me to give up? I asked, pressing my palm to my forehead. I grew up in the US, Amir. If America taught me anything, it's that quitting is right up there with pissing in the Girl Scouts lemonade jar. But as you liar, I have to give you the facts, he said. Finally, adoption agencies routinely sent staff members to evaluate the child milieu, and no reasonable agency is going to send an agent to Afghanistan. I looked at Saurabh sitting on the bed watching TV, watching us. He was sitting the way his father used to, chin resting on one knee. I am his half uncle. Does that count for anything? It does if you can prove it. I am sorry, do you have any papers or anyone who can support you? No papers, I said in a tired voice. No one knew about it. Saurabh didn't know until I told him, and I myself didn't find out until recently. The only other person who knows gone, may be dead. What are my options, Umar? I will be frank. You don't have a lot of them. Well, Jesus, what can I do? Umar breathed in, tapped his chin with the pen, let his breath out. You could still file an orphan petition, hope for the best. You could do an independent adoption. That means you would have to live with Sorab here in Pakistan day in, day out for the next 2 years. You could seek asylum on his behalf. That's a lengthy process, and you would have to prove political persecution. You could request a humanitarian visa. That's at the direction of the Attorney General, and it's not easily given. He paused. There is another option, probably your best shot. What? I said, leaning forward. You could relinquish him to an orphanage here, then file an orphan petition, start your 1 to 600 form and your home study while he's in safe place. What are those? I am sorry, the I-600 is an INS formality. The home study is done by the adoption agency you choose, Umar said. It's you know to make sure you and your wife aren't raving lunatics. I don't want to do that, I said, looking again at Sorab. I promised him I wouldn't send him back to an orphanage. Like I said, it may be your best shot. We talked a while longer, then I walked him out to his car, an old VW bug. The sun was setting on Islamabad by then, a flaming red nimbus in the west. I watched the car tilt under Umar's weight as he somehow managed to slide in behind the wheel. He rolled down the window. Amir, yes, I meant to tell you in there about what you are trying to do. I think it's pretty great. He waved as he pulled away, standing outside the hotel room and waving back. I wish Suraya could be there with me. Sorab had turned off the TV when I went back into the room. I sat on the edge of my bed, asked him to sit next to me. Mr. Faisal thinks there is a way I can take you to America with me, I said. He does? Sorab said, smiling faintly for the first time in days. When can we go? Well, that's the thing. I might take a little while, but he said it can be done and he's going to help us. I put my hand on the back of his neck. From outside, the call to prayer blared through the streets. How long? Sorab asked. I don't know. A while. Sorab shrugged and smiled wider this time. I don't mind. I can wait. It's like the sour apples. Sour apples? One time when I was really little, I climbed a tree and I ate these green sour apples. My stomach swelled and became hard like a drum. It hurt a lot. Mother said that if I had just waited for the apples to ripen, I would not have become sick. So now whenever I really want something, I try to remember what she said about the apples. Sour apples, I said. Mashallah, you are just about the smartest guy I have ever met. Sorab Jan, his ears reddened with a blush. Will you take me to that red bridge, the one with the fog? He said. Absolutely, I said. Absolutely. And we will drive up those streets, the ones where all you see in the hood of the car and the sky. Every single one of them, I said, my eyes stung with tears and I blinked them away. Is English hard to learn? I say, within a year you will speak it as well as Farsi. Really? Yes. I placed a finger under his chin, turned his face up mine. There is one other thing, Sorab. What? Well, Mr. Faisal thinks that it would be really helpful if we could ask you to stay in a home for our kids for a while. Home for kids, he said, his smile fading. You mean an orphanage? It would only be for a little while. No, he said, no, please, Sorab. It would be for just a little while. I promise. You promise you had never put me in one of those places. Amir Aga, he said. His voice was breaking, tears pooling in his eyes. I felt like a prick. This is different. It would be here in Islamabad, not in Kabul, and I would visit you all the time until we can get out and take you to America. Please, 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 no, he croaked. I am scared of that place. They will hurt me. I don't want to go. No one is going to hurt you. No, not ever again. Yes, they will. They always say they won't, but they lie. They lie. Please, God. I wiped the tears streaking down his cheek with my thumb. Sour apples, remember? It's just like the sour apples, I said softly. No, it's not. Not that place, God. Oh, God, please, no. He was trembling, snot and tears mixing on his face. Shh. I pulled him close, wrapped my arms around his shaking little body. Shh. It will be all right. We will go home together. You will see. It will be all right. His voice was muffled against my chest, but I heard the panic in it. Please promise you won't. Oh God, Amiraga, please promise you won't. How could I promise? I held my against me, held him tightly, and rocked back and forth. He wept into my shirt until his tears dried, until his shaking stopped, and his frantic pleas dwindled to indecipherable mumbles. I waited, rocked him until his breathing slowed and his body slackened. I remembered something I had heard somewhere a long time ago. That's how children deal with terror. They fall asleep. I carried him to his bed, sat him down, then I lay in my own bed looking out the window at the purple sky over Islamabad. The sky was deep black when the phone jolted me from sleep. I rubbed my eyes and turned on the bedside lamp. It was a little past 10:30 p.m. I had been sleeping for almost 3 hours. I picked up the phone. Hello, call from America, Mr. Fiaz, bored voice. Thank you. I said the bathroom light was on. Saraf was taking his nightly bath. A couple of clicks and then Suraya Salam. She sounded excited. How did the meeting go with the lawyer? I told him what Umar Faisal had suggested. Well, you can forget about it, she said. We won't have to do that. I sat up. Ravasti, why? What's up? I heard back from Kaka Sharif. He said the key was getting Sorab into the country. Once he's in, there are ways of keeping him here. So he made a few calls to his INS friends. He called me back tonight and said he was almost certain he could get Sorab a humanitarian visa. Not kidding, I said. Oh, thank God. Good all Sharif Jan. I know anyway. We will serve as the sponsors. It should all happen pretty quickly. He said the visa would be good for a year, plenty of time to apply for an adoption petition. It's really going to happen. Suraya, it's looked like it, she said. She sounded happy. I told her I loved her and she said she loved me back. I hung up. Sorab, I called rising from my bed. I have great news. I knocked on the bathroom door. Suraya Jan just called from California. We won't have to put you in the orphanage. Sorab, we are going to America. You and I, did you hear me? We are going to America. I pushed the door open, stepped into the bathroom. Suddenly, I was on my knees, screaming through my clenched teeth, screaming until I thought my throat would rip and my chest explode. Later, they said I was still screaming when the ambulance arrived.